I'm Kathleen, and I'm going to be doing my first review today on Assata, an autobiography by Assata Shakur. I read this book a few weeks back. I got a copy of it at the Urbana Free Library, and I've had it out for a few weeks now, so it's given me enough time to read it and spend a lot of time thinking about it. I found out about this book because I'm super obsessed with No Name Book Club, which is an awesome organization that the rapper No Name started in 2019, I believe. And every month they highlight 2 different books that they think are important reads. And I'm always on here looking at the books they recommend. I really recommend checking this out. You can see Assata was featured in May of last year, and you can read more about the awesome work that No Name Book Club is doing for people all across our country. And if you so wish, subscribe to their Patreon to be supporting the work they're doing in dismantling the prison industrial complex, uplifting voices that are historically oppressed, and sharing really great books with a huge, diverse community of people. I wanted to do this review first because this book is the best book I've read in quite some time, and I read a lot, so I think it really stands out amongst other works that I've been interested in as just being highly excellent. And not only is this Assata one of my personal heroes, and I think everyone deserves to know who she is and know her story, but beyond her amazing life, she is an incredible author, writer, creator, thinker, and it all comes through in her autobiography. It's an incredible piece of work. So I think everyone needs to read this book for quite a few reasons. It's basically what this video is about, and I'm super excited to talk about all of this, but to give it some context, the biggest reason everyone needs to read this book is because all of the ideas in here are so incredibly important to the current socio-political context we're living in, as far as public health, Black Lives Matter, police and prison abolition / reform, as these are all becoming more mainstream topics. I really see this work as being an opportunity to help people that aren't so aware of the historical structures of power learn a lot while enjoying a really incredible piece of work. Like many great memoirs, Assata spends a lot of time detailing her relationships with others and how those have affected and shaped her life, and in particular, she spends a lot of time talking about her Aunt Evelyn. And their story goes back all the way to when Assata's a child. Obviously at that time, she's not yet Assata. She's still Joanne, and she is about a preteen and is running away from home and gets into some not so great situations as far as being asked to steal and being in some dangerous situations where she might get hurt. Anyway, she ends up in the care of her aunt, and Evelyn stays with her and is integral to her story until the end and still afterwards. So Evelyn is a bit of an anomaly as a very successful Black woman lawyer at this time when we didn't see quite enough women getting these opportunities. She repeatedly just moves mountains for her niece. Like, she truly makes things happen that don't seem possible, and through Assata's words, it's clear the expertise that Evelyn controls in the courtroom and what a phenomenal lawyer she is, an intelligent thinker, and how experienced she is in working with the criminal judicial system. And I really like looking at Evelyn because she is so much why Assata's experience within the judicial system is unique. We don't see many people who are being victims of the law having an immediate family member who is an incredible lawyer, and often people are probably assuming that their lawyer has at least some degree of ambivalence towards whether or not they are free at the end of this. They have other concerns. There's this one scene in particular when Assata and her aunt are getting really into the nitty-gritty of things about tactical details of how to run her case. So Assata and her are sitting down, things are just getting really heated, and Assata's getting really overwhelmed. She's been incarcerated for quite some time, is under incredible amounts of stress, as is her aunt, who's being run dry by the judicial system, moving Assata from court to court, changing her dates, and moving her from jail to jail. It's too much for one woman to keep track of, and they're both like at their wits' ends and just so frustrated with everything, and it all turns into a big blow up. They get into a big argument, and Assata tells Evelyn that she's fired from being her lawyer. And when I got to this part in the book, I really was panicked for Assata. Not that I didn't know. And I felt frightened that she was letting go of this, what seemed to be key piece in her survival. Evelyn had thus far been able to do a lot of important day-to-day work mitigating this pain that is being inflicted upon Assata day in and day out, as far as just trying vigilantly to secure some portion of her rights back to her. And Assata just let her go, and like I said, was panicked, but the situation, the outcome of this is surprising to me. This tragedy didn't stand out more than any other because Assata and her aunt's love is something that is transformative, and that's really clear in Assata's memoir to me, that this fight wasn't going to end the bond that they had. And so we really just see the incredible amounts of love in this scene, and that is one reason that it stood out to me. And maybe her aunt's coming back, just for her, and maybe she's coming back because she feels, a duty, realizing this is a bigger picture, that the entire community is in ways being affected by Assata's outcome. And either way, these are both really important aspects for Evelyn to consider in her own role, in her own positionality as a Black woman herself. The other reason this outcome surprised me is because it kind of is alluding to a bigger trend in Assata's story, which is that even if Assata gets a hand up from her aunt being a great lawyer, even if she can succeed and make every part of the system work for her, every way that makes her unique in the end has the same result. Yes, Assata is not currently incarcerated. She escapes to Cuba. But the important part is that she has to leave America. So still here, even when Assata has everything she could want to help her out, once she's in the judicial system, none of it is enough, and it never will be. And to, borrow the title of another great book, Stamped from the Beginning, Assata truly is. She's predestined to have to die or leave America or be incarcerated, because those are her only options as a Black woman in America once the FBI has decided to target her. A little bit of background on this book itself. So it was published in 1987, and I was really curious about who would take on this book that's published by a prison escapee, someone that the US is actively searching for. And so it was published in the United Kingdom at Zed Books, which is the world's largest English language publishing collective. So cool. So basically that just means the company's owned and managed as a non-hierarchical cooperative by its workers. So, it's like your co-op grocery store and that kind of same structure. And like I said, Assata now lives in Cuba, which is where she wrote this after she was granted political asylum. So to give you a bit of a timeline, the book's published in 1987 by Zed Books, but to go back in time, Assata was convicted in 1973 at age 26 of murdering a cop on New Jersey Turnpike, and that would put her birth in 1947, and she's currently 73. She's been on the FBI Most Wanted Terrorist list since 2013. Obviously, they don't use her name Assata Shakur, but her her slave name, Joanne Deborah Chesimard. And she was actually the first woman to be added to the list, so a lot of people use that, I think, politically against her, use it as a bit of dog whistle politics to emphasize her criminality as a black woman. While this is a memoir of trauma, obviously, it's not all depressing because Assata highlights all the ways she's able to resist the system and find her power in really energetic, lively, and inspiring ways. So she always tries to outsmart the guards, and she consistently is able to take back bits of what she wants. My favorite scene of this, her and her fellow Black Liberation Army member, Kamau, they're being tried together for a crime they did not commit. They start off in the courtroom just telling the jury every day what bullshit has been happening to them. So they just stand up there and start reading it off every day, and every day the judge kicks them out for contempt. They don't care. They get sent to a room and there's, guards watching them. And eventually they start complaining about how cold it is in this room. It's really cold. And the guards don't want to hear them complaining anymore, and also don't want to warm the room up, which if the doors open to the hallway, the room would warm up. So as soon as Assata and Kamal start complaining, the guards go ahead and close the door to make it even colder, but obviously that in turn is giving them a lot of privacy that they take full advantage to, and are able to find a little bit of solace in their incarceration at this time, and are able to talk, and a romance blooms, and Assata gets pregnant. Yes, she literally gets the guards to let her get laid while she's incarcerated, which is just an amazing feat and shouldn't be overlooked or thought of as just, maybe, oh, it's just a little fun detail, she has sex. But this is so important that she's able to take back this bit of autonomy at this time. And if I remember correctly, Kamal says something really important when she asks, what if I get pregnant? And he's like, well, they're going to take care of, our people would take care of the child. And I think she begins to realize, wow, this is such an act of resistance. She just thinks, I have to take advantage of this opportunity because this is just the biggest fuck you to them that I'm capable in this situation. Assata really puts the pieces together about why that was such an important part of her experience in the judicial system, and obviously now her daughter is such an important part of her life and can live with her. I'm amazed by the vulnerability Assata gives the readers and how honest she is about her history. So she moves seamlessly between the past, her as a child growing up, all the way from when she's very young through her teenage years, and then the present of her being incarcerated, and even we look towards the future to see where she's going, all in parallel. And Assata perfectly illustrates just how evil she's been treated with lots of imagery throughout this autobiography. So in particular, she describes the wanted posters that cover New York City, of her claiming she's committed these various crimes with her name in big black letters. And it also quotes the insidious comments from jurors that judges just laugh off, such as, I think at one point it's something like, a juror says, yeah, I'm pretty sure she's guilty, but I think I can still be impartial, and that's given the go-ahead. So I think that kind of evidence gathering almost is another part of this autobiography that is so convincing in the details. The narrative is so accessible as well when we're looking down at this minutia, this day-to-day life that she's experiencing. We're not having to understand the theory behind all of this, but her life is giving us a lens to see in more clearly about what's going on. And that's why I say that it's very accessible to maybe a reader who isn't familiar with these kinds of ideas. I can't imagine her having to sit down to write this in Cuba and having to recall every moment that went into this story. But at the same time, it's this is her life, and as with trauma can happen at times, you just can't really not think about it. And so while we don't really know what her experience was with that, I hope it was in some way healing or reflective of where she was at and overcoming what she'd been through and reclaiming her own story in her own words, I think is really powerful. So like I said, the narrative goes back and forth between Assata growing up and Assata in prison, but there's also several poems interspersed, usually at the end of the chapter, and those really give insight into what the narrative we just read and maybe how Assata's reflecting on those events at a later time. But besides that, these poems are just really excellent. She's an incredible poet and her words are super beautiful, and these are poems I plan to return to often, so I think this is another really fantastic quality about this autobiography in particular, that she's able to weave together both the literary with the poetic in such a cohesive story. I think even in the hands of someone who's not down with abolition, or hopefully not yet down with it, it still is going to be a really important book, because Assata shows that she was not born a revolutionary. She's just so transparent in her consciousness building and the work that it took to get to where she is in her current time, in her current mind state, and is really honest about how often she had problems with other Black revolutionary groups like the Panthers and the disagreements she had with them. And I think we really see how complex the situation Assata has to navigate in order to find the best means for her ends, which is, of course, her own liberation. Assata gives a really good overview of some of the worst parts of the FBI and COINTELPRO, so I think people who are unaware of that particular terrorism would benefit from hearing firsthand the nightmare it personally was for Assata. One of my favorite parts of the autobiography, and particularly of the work Assata does with the Black Panther Party, is in her description of waking up at 4 a.m. and like barely being awake and having to trudge down to where she's gonna volunteer and having her pancakes criticized by the kids she was making breakfast for, saying there was something wrong with them, they taste bad. And I just read that and just stopped and went, wow, like making pancakes is really, like, in this moment, in this situation, just a complete revolutionary act. Just because those were kids that other people didn't think deserved to eat, and the Black Panther Party was valuing themselves in a way that was just unacceptable to the rest of society when they took it upon themselves to take care of those kids and feed that community. I thought that was a really illuminating moment in showing the range of work that can be done that falls under the umbrella of being revolutionary, and how oftentimes it's maybe not what we come to think of as protesting and marching, and it can be something like making pancakes. Another reason I find this text really accessible, in addition to the way the narrative covers a ton of ground and just conveys a lot of emotion through the detailed imagery I was describing, and in effect it just makes the book like move along and like keeps you going, and you know, I didn't get bored while I was reading it. It stays really interesting. But another reason that I find the text accessible is that it's so obviously abolitionist. I mean, it's Assata Shakur's memoir. Beyond that, like, the most recent print has Angela Davis's foreword, but we never see the narrative interrupted with Assata's own like political theory directly. It's all interwoven in her own experience. It's almost like she doesn't have to stop and tell us, like, this is what I think about this, because her life speaks so much to her own beliefs, and that she's really able to show rather than tell, which we know is so much more of an incredibly effective, convincing way to structure our argument. And it really shows the reader all the logic behind what she believes without having to lay it out. This happened, Black people are oppressed, racism exists. You just see it all working together in such a way that it illuminates the entire system very clearly. And what she believes in is telling the readers, you know, there are no criminals, crime is not random, and it arises when people lack resources. And then, to paraphrase Angela Davis, she's saying that prisons disappear people and they do not disappear social problems.